Consenting to circle members. This is optional. The person who would like to join our circle gives us their questions and comments, perhaps in person, as the first thing we do as the agenda item in our policy meeting, where we're considering that person. And then we answer their questions. And then we have questions for them and comments. And we go around and we ask them, and they answer. Our facilitator says, okay, to the consent round, that we have Susan join our group in the garden circle. Then that's the proposal. Now, let us assume that in this process and this, nothing alarming came up. Let's assume that maybe one or two of us interviewed Susan already previously. Why? It saves us time. She got a sense of what it is we do here in the gardening circle, and we got a sense of the fact that she's been gardening for years. Okay. The person is still present during the consent round. If there is a concern which will be voiced as an objection, there can be conditions. No objection, no objection, no objection, objection. Thank you, we'll get back to you. No objection, no objection. Okay. The consent round involves everybody except Susan, but she's still there. Thank you, what's your objection? Well, Susan's dog, Diggy, which goes with her everywhere. In fact, here he is sitting in the room. Diggy likes to dig holes in any kind of dirt anywhere, and you know, garden dirt, especially our raised beds, is very loose. I'm afraid that if we just say no objection, that unless we put a condition, that we might get holes in our garden. So I would like to modify the proposal. Okay, what's your modification? That we invite Susan to join our garden circle, and when she brings Diggy to the garden, she brings a leash and puts Diggy in a place where Diggy has water and food, and we send him good vibes, but it can't get anywhere near one of our raised beds. All right, to the proposal as modified, Susan, Diggy, la la la, please say no objection or no, or objection, no objection, no objection, etc. Okay, Susan, welcome to the garden circle. Yay, we celebrate big time. Why? Because it's nice to mark the specialness of Susan and Diggy joining our garden circle. It's very simple. It's very quick. Your questions, your comments.
I have a question in general about like when, so you're going through the objections, somebody has an objection, and then they bring up the thing about the dog.
Mm-hmm.
What if the Susan says like, wants to say, well, I like bringing my dog for this and this and this and this reason.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in general, most people, or I mean like that could be a natural process that people want to fall into is responding, and that's the same with other situations like this in consent rounds where someone says objection, let me modify this proposal, someone modifies the proposal, but then in these examples, since they're theoretical, no one has responded being like, oh, well, I don't agree with that. It just keeps going around in a circle. Like, how do you prevent that from happening?
I'd like to learn a little bit more about the that you're referring to that we would prevent. And that is, does the person, it's not Susan, it's somebody else in the circle, one of our current garden circle members.
Right.
I don't agree that we should modify the proposal that Susan brings Diggy, but helps him stay physically away from the place he could dig by being, say, having a relatively short leash connected to a garden fence post, and he can't get to that bit or that bit. The person says, I don't agree with that. Okay, what does the person do when they don't agree with that modification of the proposal?
They wait until the consent round and then say they have an objection.
Right. And so then we ask them, and let's say that that's you, well, what is your objection?
Right. Oh, and then if I were Susan or whatever, I'd say my objection is that.
No, Susan is the one with the dog, and
okay.
You are the person in the circle. Is that what you meant?
I was saying that if Susan were to counter, like, no, I need my dog by me for these reasons.
You mean like all the time, Diggy
yeah,
will be by
right,
me?
Right.
What would happen in that circle?
Yeah.
Well, I'm guessing that the facilitator would say, okay, the proposal that we just consented to, actually we don't have agreement from Susan to have Diggy not be available to the garden beds. Susan, can you think of a way that Diggy can be with you but cannot dig? Yes.
Okay.
She objects. Thank you, Susan. Why do you object? Because I don't want Diggy to have to be tied up to the fence. Diggy will whine. Diggy will be unhappy. Diggy goes with me everywhere. Thank you, Susan, for that information. Now we know. Do you think Diggy would be... I'm the facilitator. Do you think Diggy would be able to manage being without you directly right next to you and you without him for the hour or two that we're doing gardening while he can see you because he's over there and you can see him and you can go, hello, sweetie, whatever you do with your dog, kisses through the air. People do that, right? And Diggy wags his tail and barks, ruff, ruff. And so would you be willing to do that? No.
My other question is, did this circle consent to considering Susan's application and having her there to consider her application? Or do they have to consider every application that comes to them in this way?
My guess is we might know already that we really want Susan because she's a master gardener and she has no dog, or Diggy doesn't dig, or she's willing to leave him at home. Or we might already know that Susan tends to have a reputation for being not cooperative and or doesn't know anything about gardening and is not cooperative, and Diggy goes everywhere and he has this digging reputation. We might decide ahead of time not even to consider it. Do we have to consider everybody who might apply to join our gardening circle? Well, my guess is, since Sociocracy does not address that we have to or that we don't have to, that we, the circle members, make that decision as a policy for us regarding this. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, and it might be written into the domain and aims that a circle is limited to a certain number of people.
Probably it is. But it wouldn't be written in the domain or the aims. It would be just a policy that we created.
I see.
See, because it's too specific.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Wouldn't you have to justify someone not coming in by one of your criteria somehow? And you could do that. You could say, well, we understand that Diggy has to go everywhere and Diggy is going to dig, so we're preempting this and just saying. Now, it could be a wrong understanding, and so that might be why you want to go through the process anyway.
My concern is that once a proposal, and in this case, the applicant's application for joining the circle is the proposal, once a proposal is being considered by the group, it's difficult to stop it from being modified and going through.
Yes, no, we can stop it.
Well, once a proposal is being considered by the whole group,
by the whole circle.
Yeah, the only way that it can be stopped in its tracks and not be considered at all anymore is if somebody has a reasonable explanation or a reasonable objection.
That convinces the rest of us.
That convinces the rest of you. But once it's on the floor for consideration...
I think you're saying there seems to be, from what we've learned so far, a bias towards saying yes. Yes, I think there is a bias towards this, but we don't have to let that bias rule us. We can have many of us object. Once we see right in front of our eyes in our own circle meeting during this agenda item that Susan is not willing to either follow the suggested condition we make for her to join our circle, since Diggy goes with her everywhere, she isn't willing to leave Diggy at home or with Diggy's dog friends and another adult human person. She isn't willing to create or agree to any other method to simultaneously have Diggy and she be together, but he's not digging our beds. Therefore, we'll probably all say objection. And the facilitator, and Susan's sitting right there, right? So the facilitator will say, okay, thank you, what's your objection? And Susan's going to hear all these objections. And they're all quite reasonable because they have to do with our garden's aims.
Right? Back to the aims.
Yeah, and the aims is what we keep pointing to on our consent decision-making wall chart, which we point to and which Susan can see. Mm-hmm. Plus, she's in our group and she knows how sociocracy works. Mm-hmm. Or she's brand new and now she's learning.
So she would not have a lot of reason to say that you're being unfair biased.
No,
and
she
just
wouldn't have a
discriminating.
lot of reasonable reason to say that. Nevertheless, do you know what kind of folks sometimes join communities? Sometimes. Folks who would be saying, this is a class system, or you're oppressing me, or I'm being discriminated against, or you all are being mean to me, or you call this community, that's not community. Have you ever heard that in your life? Okay, or something. This might occur. It might occur. It's not because you did anything wrong. It's because Susan, new to community, new to sociocracy, is projecting onto our group what she thinks should happen. Perhaps she has not listened to that philosopher Mick Jagger. Will you help me with Mick Jagger's most famous philosophical aphorism? Ready? You don't always get what you want. Thank you. Perhaps Susan has not studied philosophy or been part of the rock and roll era back in the day.